I'd like to call the September 21st Planning Commission meeting to order. Can you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Silverman?
Present.
Commissioner Marsters?
Present.
Commissioner Harper Pedersen?
Present.
Vice Chair Bergman?
Present.
Chair Gutierrez?
Present. Public comment. Public comment is limited to items not on the agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have a matter placed on the future Commission agenda for more comprehensive action or report. Is there anyone that would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda item or on the agenda? Come to the front, please. And if you could state your name too, please.
My name is Aaron Arvey, and I had a question for the committee regarding the minutes from the last meeting. So during the last meeting, a development at 1312 Laurel Street was discussed, and subsequent plans were then drafted to try and meet the specifications of that the committee laid out at the end of the last meeting. When I received the plans, though, I was surprised to see that several of the comments that the committee made weren't actually followed by the new plans, or it was unclear if they were followed in the new plans. When I sent an email to the developer, it was unclear if the new plans actually did in fact meet the specifications. So as a result, I wanted to ask the committee for clarification to make sure that everyone was on the same page. So there were 3 points in particular that I thought were unclear in the new plans. One was the height of the southwest parapet, which I thought was going to be decreased 3.5 feet. It's actually totally unclear how much it was decreased. The space in between the two properties that would be used for landscaping, which I thought was 2.25 feet, or 27 inches. Instead, they're proposing 19 inches, which is 30% less. And then additionally, I was under the impression that the committee was prescribing horizontal landscaping that would include plantings beyond just vines and a trellis, or even if that's actually specified in the plans. So I just wanted to get some clarification on that, since it wasn't clear to the developers apparently. So, thank you.
Can you repeat your first point about the height of the new parapet?
Yeah. So my understanding was that the parapet would be 3.5 feet lower in the southwest corner, and it looks like it's either the same or a tiny bit lower. It's actually unclear from the current plans, as they don't actually have dimensions.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, let me go back to. Somebody want to jump in on that? Or?
Okay, so I mean, So on the parapet, my understanding was that it was basically going to be eliminated.
Yeah.
That was my understanding as well.
So my understanding was the parapet, or at least the aspect that impacted the neighbor's property, where it wasn't necessary for code purposes, it was going to be eliminated. My understanding with respect to the space in between the rear of the property and the neighboring property is that it was going to be pushed forward and away from the property as much as possible as allowed by code. And I know that distances were mentioned at the meeting, but that was really just me trying to do math in my head, and I am a lawyer. So the intent was simply to be pushed forward as much as possible without requiring a variance or otherwise being out of compliance with the code.
But it was at least 2.25 feet.
The 2.25 feet was what I calculated in my head, but I think that the intent was not 2.25 feet. The intent was whatever was possible without requiring a variance and being consistent with the code.
A foot more forward on the building, closest to Laurel, right? So it was like 15 feet, I think. Whatever that calculation was.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to my intent. I can't speak to the calculation, and my intent was just to move it as far forward as possible and away from the neighboring property. And then, as far as the landscaping was concerned, I mean, I think that we just wanted to have a nice screen. I don't think we did specify as to whether or not it would be vines or something else, but I mean, I think that what was intended, and I don't know whether the record reflects this, but I'd say this is what the minutes should reflect, is that it be as lush and developed as feasible in the space available.
Though I would say that in the conversation, I don't know that I don't remember it being much more feasible than having just vertical vine landscaping, that there was going to be a number of problems with access, even with the building pushed as far forward as it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry.
So part 3 doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's kind of how I left thinking it was going to be a vertical vine. But I mean, I would agree, David, if they could do more, that'd be great, but that's not how I left
I think we just referred to it
it.
as like a living wall is the way that we referred it. And, you know, all of the discussion sort of rotated around the idea that this was going to be a big change for the neighbor, and that to the extent we could buffer it, we would want it buffered. So I guess I think the notice, let's see, the minutes
Yeah, the
are
motion.
accurate with respect to the distance, I believe, and then with respect to the parapet, do they say anything about the parapet?
Reduced to the extent feasible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think it should say reduced to the extent permitted by code, rather than to the extent feasible. And then 3 is correct. And then, does it say anything about the living wall? I don't see anything.
Yeah.
We refer to it as a green wall.
The green wall. Where is it?
And motion number 3.
Yeah.
That's kind of a combo of setback and.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that should read, green wall designed to provide as much buffering as feasible. That would be my proposal to modify the
motion?
the minutes to reflect what the motion intended. I don't otherwise have any changes to the minutes, and unless anyone else does, I would move to approve the minutes as amended.
Could I just say one more thing, or is my time over?
No.
Okay. Vis-a-vis the distance between the properties, or between the buildings, I was still hoping for the 2¼ feet, the full amount, if possible. So since the committee does have the ability to decrease the size of the building, having that extra almost 3/4 of a foot would in fact make a substantial difference in terms of what we could plant there. And we could actually put some shrubbage down that would then actually give some variation to the wall instead of just...
My understanding was the intent was that we were to push that building as far forward as we could so that it would not impact the required distance from the street, but everything else was supposed to be moved as far forward as possible.
Yeah, and that's what
I
the
think
minutes
we're all
reflect.
on the same page.
I think what's being asked for is a reduction in the building size, and even if that was something that we could have done then, I don't think we can do it now. So my motion is to approve the minutes as I asked to amend them a moment ago.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Good luck. So we just took approval of minutes as well. So let's moving along to public hearing. Procedure for public hearing. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, et cetera, on the application, follow with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written Correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speaker should fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary prior to addressing the commission. The speaker should come up to the microphone to speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist staff in preparing minutes. And the first item is 191 Lemoore Drive, APN 051-161-100, consideration of a request for a general plan map amendment and zoning district map amendment. And it's Laura. Hi.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Laura Russell. I'll be presenting the item before you tonight. The subject site is located at the end of Lemoore Drive on the cul-de-sac that you can see here on the map. It's at the southern edge of the city, so the properties to the south and to the east are in the county. The property is about 12,900 square feet in area. It's currently developed with a single-family home and a detached garage. The property owners applied for annexation in 2013. The primary reason they indicated at that time was to reduce confusion about access. Historically, there had been access from the south, from the unincorporated area, which would lead to some confusion over the years. So for emergency response purposes, they wanted their house to truly front onto Lemoore and have that be their primary entrance and their address. So since the annexation, they have done some remodeling and really reinforced that as the front of the house. So it does truly front onto Lemoore. When there's an annexation of properties of this size, the general plan requires that that property receive an RS3 pre-zoning, and that pre-zoning designation needs to stay in place for 2 years. So the property owners had originally requested to be in the RS6 zoning district, but the city's general plan and municipal code did not allow that. So at the time, the general plan amendment and the zoning district boundary map amendment were made to bring the property into the city with the RS3 zoning district. So it was not until August of this year that the property owners were eligible to apply for the rezoning that they had been seeking. So the homeowners are requesting a general plan amendment and zoning map amendment to change from RS3 to RS6, or in common language, that's the low density residential to kind of the common single family residential zoning. They are not applying for any other entitlements at this time. They have indicated that they might want to demolish their existing garage and build a bigger one, but they have not yet applied for that project. So if you look at the map that's on the screen, as well as page 2 of your staff report, you can see the site is in the red box. The unincorporated area is below it. That's what's in the pink. The properties to the north and to the west are yellow. That's our RS6 zoning. And then what you can see, there are a few properties that have the kind of light brown tan color, and that's the RS3 zoning. So right now the site is not contiguous to any other RS3 properties. Staff received a question about the future potential for the site to be subdivided if the rezone is approved. So I wanted to provide the Commission a little bit more information on that. Given the lot size, it does appear that the property could potentially be split in the future. That would require a formal application before the Planning Commission, full analysis, review, and you would have to make the findings in order to approve that. The property owners have indicated they are not seeking that entitlement and that they wish to stay in their home, but since we received that question, we wanted to make sure that information was available to you as well as to the public. We were also asked, what is the approximate lot sizes of the nearby properties, and could any of those potentially be subdivided in the future? And those properties range from about 7,400 up to about 9,300. Those properties there on Lemoore and on the cul-de-sac. So those would not be large enough to subdivide. So if there ever was an application to split 191 Lemoore Drive, it would be a unique case in this neighborhood. So staff sent the required legal notice, and we did receive one email. They were just clarifying what density would be possible at this location. Specifically, they asked staff whether apartments would be possible. So we did let them know that the request was for single-family zoning consistent with the adjacent properties. The proposed general plan amendment and zoning district map amendment require city council action. So there are two resolutions before you tonight. Staff would recommend that the Commission adopt both resolutions, recommending that the City Council make the proposed amendments to the general plan and to the zoning district map. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and the property owner's representative is here this evening as well. Thank you.
So what's the current size of the lot?
The current size is 12,000, about 900.
The county zoning it's adjacent to, is that comparable to RS3 or RS6?
I don't know. It's not something that I locked into for this general plan amendment. The development pattern, if we can probably
And
go
it looks
back.
more like it's,
Is that you can just barely see it. So the properties directly to the south, so the ones that front onto Lemoore are in the city, and the ones behind that are actually in the unincorporated area. So it looks like there's maybe two different subdivisions at two different time frames. So to the east is a little bit more spread out and more similar to Lemoore, and then kind of to the south is a little bit different development pattern. But I'm not familiar with their development standards.
okay.
Any other questions for
I
staff?
have no
right now?
questions about this.
Does the applicant want to say anything, or any questions for the applicant? We good?
I mean, I can observe. So I kind of have an issue with this, and I was the one who asked questions of staff. And my concern is that, and I recognize that this is really just about the rezoning. It's not about the division. But having dealt with division of lots before, I know that they're entitled to it, basically. I mean, I'm not prejudging anything. I'm not talking about what might happen in the future, but that at some point, if it's requested, I know what findings need to be made in order to do that. And, I'm concerned that, what's going to happen is it's going to be requested at some point in the future, and that's going to be before us, and folks are going to say, well, why, this is terrible. We've got 7,400 to 9,000 square foot lots. These are going to be 6,000 square foot lots. It's different for the community, and we're going to be telling them, well, sorry, you should have been here when we rezoned it. And yet the notice does not give folks the opportunity to recognize that that is a potential issue in the future. So, my question to staff was, well, can we renotice this to let people know that at some point in the future this property may be divided? And the response was, that's not legally required. And I get that, and I take the legal advice. I understand that it's not legally required, but it still troubles me. And it's nothing against. I believe the owner of the property when they say they have no intent to subdivide it. I absolutely believe them. I'm sure that they're 100% sincere. They may even promise never to subdivide it, but at some point they're going to sell it. And the economics of property here in San Carlos, someone is going to subdivide it. So that's the issue I have with it. I don't know that that's curable. So, absent some sort of different noticing, I'm going to vote against it. That's where I am.
My only question is, what are the advantages if you are not going to divide the property from changing from an R3 to an R6 designation? And that's probably
Staff-related
a
question. I
staff
would imagine
question.
density.
Sorry, Laura.
The biggest difference, given the layout of this property in terms of the two different zoning districts, are related to setbacks and lot coverage.
Okay.
So the lot coverage maximum in the RS3 is 35%, and within the RS6 is 50%. And then in regards to setback, I think the one that would make the difference here would be the interior side setback, which is 10 feet in the RS3 district and 5 feet in the RS6 district.
Okay, so it has significant impact even if they were going to keep it one big lot. If they wanted to build a new house, there would be significant differences in their setbacks and in their lot coverage percentage.
The biggest would be in lot coverage, especially given the kind of one-story nature
Got it.
of what they're seeking, which is the larger garage.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Great. I've got one speaker card too for Lemoore. Greg Lindley.
Hi, my name is Greg Lindley, and I'm the property owner of 35 Carmel, which is the property directly south of theirs. You can see in the map, it's the one with the white roof. I just wanted to register one thing for the public, at least. I'm not necessarily speaking against this because I do totally trust that they're going to be good with their word. And similar to David, I have no reason to disbelieve them, but I also know that sometimes properties are sold and other people might come in and want to subdivide them. And the only reason I'm calling this to people's attention is because currently Carmel Lane, which runs underneath to the south, is there's an easement on there which gives us access to that road. And the property where I am and the one to the east of it also have that easement, as well as this one on 191 Lemoore. And as previously stated, that was the entrance once upon a time. So my only concern is if it should it ever be subdivided, like there could be speculation that it would be, I almost wonder if there's now another entrance to the backside, and considering that's my front door, that's a place where I would have concern. But I know that this is not a hearing or a proposal for the actual remodeling, and if anything like that should ever occur, there will be subsequent discussion, but I just wanted to register that as is.
Thank you. Staff, someone. So now it's been brought up a couple times in regards to potential lots, but this is not a hearing for that, so there's really not much we can do on that in terms of limiting a rezoning with something that's not before us, right? Okay.
You're correct.
Okay. But, all right. Well, any other person want to speak? Joe, you want to come up?
My name's Joe Rodden, and I'm a real estate broker. And the Boyles, who are actually the owners of this property, asked me, asked me to appear here, primarily to express their reasoning for wanting to do this. One is to move the existing garage, which is ready to fall down, further forward and to the east, so that they will have more of a yard. They just spent a substantial amount of money remodeling that house, and it's not very likely that in any time near future that someone would come in and pay enough money for what's there to warrant it being subdivided. As for the access issue from Carmel Lane, the public documents indicate that access goes away when Francis Lane, which was the intent at the time, be brought in to become the front access to this house. That was changed when the city allowed the development of Lemoore Drive, meaning their access then became Lemoore Drive. So technically, the access that gentleman's concerned about, I don't believe, is still valid. It's also in the county, not in the city of San Carlos. So to get an access that way, if you were going to subdivide the property, would require the county of San Mateo also cooperating in that subdivision, which I don't believe they would. I believe their restriction is greater as to the size of the parcels that would be allowed in the county zoning. I believe your lot's probably 8,000 or 9,000 square feet, 12.5. So I don't believe that either one of the two concerns that have been addressed truly are ones that would need to be considered now. If someone was going to subdivide that, they would have done it before they spent all the money on the house.
Do they want to voluntarily agree to a deed restriction preventing subdivision?
I would venture to say they probably wouldn't object because it's been in the family for probably 55, 60 years, that piece of property. The current owners have absolutely no intent of doing anything other than living there, and they moved out of a very nice two-story house to move into a single-story house. And it's, like I say, they spent a pretty good-sized chunk of money remodeling it, changing the entrance, bringing it around, including bringing all the utilities around to Lemoore. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I just wish there was a way. I mean, since they may be willing, it would solve my problem completely. I'm just worried. It's not that I wouldn't. I have a problem with there not being notice to folks who might object. And so, yeah, it would solve my problem immediately if they just agreed to a deed restriction. That would solve my problem immediately.
Can't say for certain, and unfortunately, their plans to travel to Europe were made 2 years ago, and that's why they're not here. That was something they just, the timing of this turned out to where the availability of the city of San Carlos happened to coincide with them being traveling. That's why they asked me to show up. I pretty much, again, I can't speak for certain, but I know they have no intention of doing it. Whether someone in the future would, anything's possible. All of Lemoore Drive could be redeveloped in the future. Are we going to put a deed restriction that says that can't be done?
Again, like if the notice indicated that that a division was possible in the future, and folks had an opportunity to speak to it, I wouldn't have a problem.
Did the notice that go out, and I don't know, but did the notice go out look like this one? Because this talks about that.
The notice is in the packet.
in the back.
It's attachment 4, and it doesn't.
Okay, so it was just that page.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I mean, I can tell you that whether the noticing had changed, it would probably not change my mind. I recognize the concern, though, David, I do. But I'm probably fine with voting.
I mean, I could make a motion to continue to a date certain, but I mean, again, I'm just one vote, and you folks are welcome to vote yes. If I thought that folks understood what this did and the potential effect in the future, I would probably vote yes for it as well. So,
Anybody have a strong opinion either way? Because if you make some motion, then nobody's going to second it anyway, so if that, I mean, if we're okay to move along, can I see the motion on the screen, please?
Sure. I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval of a request for a general plan map amendment at 191 Lemoore Drive, APN 051-161-100, to designate the property single-family 60Us/AC based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report. I'm sorry, do I have to make these motions separately, I assume?
You can make them, if you're the maker of the motion, you could make the second one. I would assume that, well, they go together, so I think that's fine.
Well, then I further move that that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval on a request for a zoning district map amendment at 191 Lemoore Drive, APN 051-161-100, to designate the property RS6 single family based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or any noes?
opposed.
Opposed.
I think it
So
was 3-2.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, next item, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to recuse myself from this item. We tried to get a ruling from the FPPC and didn't get a formal ruling, so I might have a possible conflict, and I'm going to hand it over to Shannon from this point on.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 545 Walnut Street, APN 050-072-220, consideration of the design review and grading and dirt hall approval to allow for new construction of a 4-story mixed-use building above an underground parking garage. And I do want to mention that I did have ex parte communications with one of the residents of the neighboring building, Vanessa Navala. I just wanted to disclose that. Okay. And I'll have staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jill Lewis, and I will present to you the request for design review approval and grading and dirt hall certificate for a new mixed-use project consisting of an underground parking garage, 1 ground floor commercial space, and 9 residential units at 545 Walnut Street. The subject site is zoned MUD, mixed use downtown, and has a corresponding general plan land use designation of mixed use medium density, both of which allow up to 50 dwelling units per acre. The project site is one parcel measuring 7,533 square feet in area, currently developed with 2 units. The neighborhood consists of mostly multifamily residential uses with a few commercial properties at 3 of the 4 corners. The project requires Planning Commission approval of the following: design review, which is required for all new construction, and a grading and dirt hall certificate, which is required for grading over 1,000 cubic yards. As I mentioned, it's a new 4-story mixed-use project. The below-grade parking does not count against floor area. There is 1 ground floor commercial space and 9 apartments on floors 1 through 4, it should say. Landscaping and associated site improvements are also included. The architectural style of the structure is modern, using a variety of materials. A driveway leads down into the garage, which has 12 spaces total, including 1 ADA van accessible parking space. The perforated metal material found on the front elevation wraps around to both side elevations, which are broken up with recesses, varying stucco colors, and plain breaks. The rear elevation continues the use of the perforated metal panels at the 4 decks and the enclosed ground floor patio. The right side wall also has additional decorative perforated metal panels and recessed windows. A perforated metal screen in a bronze hue enhances the residential entrance with punched openings. A wooden trellis frames the 4th story. Chiseled limestone enhances the commercial space and also makes up the majority of the front elevation. Two different colors of stucco are used on the sides and rear, one being a dark gray and the other a light khaki. So this is a rendering of the side elevation, just to give you another view. Landscape improvements include interlocking permeable pavers found to the north of the driveway and leading to an alternate entry door and in front of the commercial space. Additional interlocking paving tiles are found at the left side and rear patios. Numerous trees, shrubs, and grasses are proposed on the south side of the driveway, outside and within the front facade feature, and at the rear. A tupelo tree is located in front of the structure amidst assorted grasses. The rear property line is bordered by dogwood and Carolina laurel cherry trees. The grading and dirt hall certificate is necessary because the total grading exceeds 1,000 cubic yards. Total grading for this project is 1,755 cubic yards. Approximately 1,725 cubic yards of earth will be cut from the site for the purpose of creating the underground parking garage, 30 cubic yards of which will fill the site for a total export of 1,695 cubic yards. For empty trucks going to the site, they will exit Whipple Road off of US Highway 101, turn right on El Camino Real, left onto San Carlos Avenue, and right onto Walnut Street to the project site. For full trucks leaving the site, they would turn left onto Walnut Street, left onto San Carlos Avenue, right onto El Camino Real, left onto Britton Avenue, onto the US Highway 101 south ramp towards San Jose. The anticipated haul location is in Palo Alto. The approximate capacity of the trucks is 20 cubic yards, which equals roughly 90 trucks hauling dirt from the site. Oops, I keep doing that. So the first meeting was held in early September 2014. Staff requested that the applicants hold an additional meeting, this time with invitations sent to the tenants within a 300-foot radius. This second meeting was held at the site in January 2015. This second round of outreach produced a great number of concerns, particularly from tenants located at 551 Walnut Street. A form letter was created by one of those tenants at 551 Walnut Street in late April 2015, wherein the tenants could check off their concerns related to the project. Boxes that the neighbors could check off included concerns about the height and massing of the structure, the effect of the commercial space would have on traffic and on-street parking, and negative impacts on sunlight, amongst other concerns. The project architects met with representatives of both property owners and John Matthews Architects, who was a third-party architect that the property owner at 551 Walnut Street had hired, to discuss concerns and potential mitigation of the proposed project. The terms of agreement were related to planting, massing, the use of decorative exterior panels, and colors. Staff recommends striking condition number 22 from the code compliance certificate, as the city cannot enforce an agreement between two private property owners. The commission may choose to add language from that letter as conditions of approval that are based off the language within that letter. And that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions for staff, I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I believe the architects have a presentation of their own.
Two questions. One, first on item 22, can we just include as a condition of approval that the items contained in the letter are made conditions of approval, rather than...
We can certainly do that. One of the concerns, if you look at it with respect to colors and with respect to details of the future landscaping plan, had to do with the property owner at 555 Walnut essentially approving those components prior to building permit issuance. This, planning would have no objection to that, but the authority to approve needs to rest within the city, because we can't really, give that authority to a third party. So that's our concern. But you can certainly
everything with the exception of that.
We can do that if that's the pleasure of the commission.
Okay. And then, can I see the north elevation again? Was that just it? Did you just go past it?
Oh.
So, is it? No, that's the south.
South.
I think. So that's the north.
Yes.
So, I don't mean to... Is this just like a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of situation? I mean, the south side's got all the landscaping, and the north side is a monolithic wall. I mean, is there any reason why we wouldn't have the same landscaping on both sides?
I think
Okay, thanks. All right, that's it for me for right now.
Yeah, I'd like to wait for the applicant.
Any other questions for staff?
I actually had a question about, on page 3, so, and I'm trying to understand this, and maybe you can help me. So the rear, these are under applicable standards. Under the rear setbacks, it's got 0, and the proposal is 20 feet. And then it says required side and rear yards for residential in feet. And the requirement is 15 for living room, 10 for bedroom, 5 feet for other rooms with windows. Okay? And it's got 15 feet for living rooms and 20 feet for bedrooms. Now, the lot is only 50 feet wide. So if there's a 20-foot setback on either side for a bedroom, that bedrooms cannot be more than 10 feet wide.
They're going to put the bathrooms on the
I'm trying to understand the numbers
Seems like
for the proposal.
That too.
Yeah. So, but if there's a 20-foot setback, those are minimum setbacks from the lot line for any of those rooms.
Right, so the required setback is 10 feet for bedrooms, and the applicant is exceeding that by providing 20 feet.
But is that 20, we'll find out. Is that 20 feet from one side or 20 feet from both sides?
Commissioners, my name is Toby Levy. I'm the architect for the project. I will explain it to you when I get to that point about the floor plans, unless you want me to do it now and I can find it
I've got
in our
some other
presentation.
questions, too.
Okay. Can you do that? Okay. As I said, my name is Toby Levy. I'm the architect for the project, and we've been working on this for the last year and a half. As presented, the project is an infill site in the MUD, and we're surrounded, we back onto the 4 stories of parking in the municipal garage, and the corner has the 4-story office building, as well as being adjacent to the 3 stories over residential. This is a building next to us. There is a 4-story over parking, 5-story building on Walnut across the street, and this is very much an MUD district. It's a transition district from downtown to the residential district, and we've sought to embrace that in our project. And you can see just from our block, there's the one all the way on the right is the big office building, and it sort of moves down in scale. Our project, sort of from the start, we actually thought to try and embrace the context that we had. You'll notice that our project has units face front and back, and we've inserted a courtyard in the center. So your question about where the bedrooms face is that the unit in the center faces the courtyard we've created, allowing for the setbacks and the openings. Additionally, we were responsible for the amendment to the planning code because we actually initially sought a variance from the front build-to line so we could further respect the building and the development pattern on our block that we thought would not change much. So our project voluntarily set back 10 feet from the front property line in one space and 17 to where the building goes over the garage, because we really wanted to modulate the mass of the building in respect to the smaller 4-unit building that is next to us. And your question about weren't we nice to the people on the north side? Well, we gave them the courtyard, and we actually thought that our planting in the courtyard would provide additional privacy and breaking up to anything on their building. Their units don't face much on our building, and in reality our agreement at 551 is that that owner is providing us a landscape buffer that we will plant and maintain for the first year or so. I forgot the exact details, and that they will maintain after that, and we will provide the trellis on which it was going to grow. So we've embraced the whole idea about working with our neighbors and trying to sort of fit the building in and be respectful. If you're familiar with the municipal parking lot, there is planting, oh, it doesn't shine on there. There is planting some tall redwood trees that will find the further backdrop between our rear units and the municipal parking lot. We go down to an underground garage. We have 12 parking spaces, including a backup space, so we do not have to back up into to Walnut Street. So there's a turnaround space as well as the 12 parcels, as well as the garbage and everything else we need down there. On the upper floor is the first floor plan, and we really wanted to create this sort of expression of commercial use in the MUD, hence the flared stairs that go to the commercial. We see the commercial being occupied by a small business, possibly someone who also lives in the building. So we don't see it as a retail use. It's really about, a business use. And the major residential is over to is on the south side, and it is the ramp up until our building. The reason for the screen and the planting both sides is to give its presence and to create a 2-story volume from which you will enter. Going up, you can see the two-story volume of the commercial space and a one-bedroom unit behind, and then it starts to get a two-bedroom unit. Incidentally, there are two one-bedroom units on that first floor. This makes more sense when you look at the building section, because we're required to have a really tall first story for our commercial. It's 15 feet. We've actually made it even taller so we could have 2 floors of units sort of buried behind it, which also helps to diminish the scale of the building. On the upper floor, there's a large 3-bedroom unit and another 2-bedroom unit. So in all, we have I guess it's 1 3-bedroom, 5 2-bedrooms, and 3 1-bedrooms. I'd like Casey to explain the size of the lot led to a lot of work with the building department, the fire department, the outside plan checker, and so we're really confident that we've resolved the issues that might impact further changes to the building mass and plans. So,
But before you leave,
yes.
so the reason the bedrooms are not dealing with the 20-foot is because there's no window that faces the property line. Okay,
Right.
that's what I was trying to get
sorry.
at.
So that you can see around the center courtyard, the window of the bedroom faces interiorly.
Faces the courtyard. Or
and,
it faces the back of the building,
correct,
not the
correct.
side of the building.
Correct.
That's what I was asking for.
Okay.
My name is Casey Fieser. I'm with Toby Levy's office. And as Toby mentioned, we've had many meetings with the city. They did an in-house building review, plan check, and then after that, it went to an outsourced plan checker. We've met with the outsourced plan checker, building official, fire marshal, and we've come out to an agreement on how we feel it's the safest building. And one issue that was coming up was the courtyards. We have the center courtyard and the rear courtyard that the units open up onto. With a type 5A building, what happened was those courtyards are considered egress courtyards, meaning that the firemen will come in, get their ladders, and rescue people from the bedroom windows down into these egress courtyards, which then, per code, have to open up directly to the public right-of-way. We are proposing a type 3A building. So with a 3A building, those courtyards no longer are considered egress courtyards. It goes away. They're just courtyards. That being said, we're still providing an access directly from the street back to these courtyards. You can see it in the yellow on the top and the reddish orange on the bottom. Thing is, these are now rated 2-hour rated exit passageways. So instead of being out in the open, say in between 2 buildings, you're now going into a protected 2-hour rated enclosure. So say both buildings are on fire, this is now actually could be seen as a safer condition where you're going inside a structure that will be tested to last 2 hours versus possibly running in between 2 buildings on fire. Other things talked about with the plan checker are all of our corridors, we're bumping them up to be 2-hour rated. And then also as part of the 3A rating, it means all of our exterior walls are going to be 2-hour rated instead of 1-hour rated. So we're doing all these extra to create a safer building.
So I want to go back one other thing. So not only did we work very diligently with the fire marshal and the building official, as part of our negotiations with the neighbor next door, you can see the additional setback on the top floor that says 15'8", and it's by 5 feet. And that was in deference to the one piece of the building that was actually closest to our structure. The other building is like 21 feet away, and this was, I think, 7 feet away. So they have a corner window, and in deference to that, we actually set this section of our building back another 5 feet, so we could provide an additional buffer to the neighboring building. As I mentioned before, these are some of our neighbors. 551 is next door. 525 is 2 buildings away. This is the corner of Walnut and San Carlos. And lastly, this is the 5-story building that actually didn't try to reduce its mass so much on the corner, on our corner at Walnut. So you've seen these elevations, but I wanted to go through a little bit what the idea was behind. You can see the metal screened entry. We are proposing this material. It's a locally made material in sections, and it really what we wanted to do is have a screen front and back with planting both sides. We thought that that's one of the advantages of living down here. There's such great weather, and it would provide a nice buffered entry to walk between the two. The other part of the other piece we're providing is actually a simulated limestone. Again, it's warmth in color. It creates a nice scale of the building, and it will sort of like give it a presence and a long-term stability. The side of the building picks up these colors. We've introduced a dark color to reduce the scale, and these are the same planting that we provide to sort of create a decorated backdrop for that building. And lastly, you've seen this elevation, but you can see the reason to have the screen is actually to create more presence of the residential entry as you walk through this garden, as opposed to the commercial entry that splays beyond. I'm available for any questions.
Any more questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to now open it up for public comment. I have 2 speaker cards. If anyone else wishes to speak, if you wouldn't mind filling out a speaker card in the corner and then handing it over to our staff, and they'll get it to me, and then we'll start. So the first speaker card I have is Vanessa Navala. Do you want to speak?
And I have a presentation. Okay, so, all right. My name is Vanessa Nevala. I live at 551 Walnut Street. I used to be an architectural designer for 15 years. I now administrate large construction projects. I will be adversely affected by the 545 project along with my neighbors. Here's our building. We have a central corridor. In the front wings, there are 3 units on each side. In the rear, there are 12 units on each side. 30 units total, approximately 60 residents in the building as a whole, 24 in the rear units pictured. In the rear, there's also a pool. The T shape of our building is important to this presentation. This side of our building faces northwest. We cast our own shadow on ourselves in the morning, but in the afternoon we get good sun. We also have blue sky views. The windows you see in the rear are the only windows in 9 units. We have no other windows facing other directions. 3 units at the far rear have small secondary windows facing the Samtrans garage and provide no sunlight or views. So 12 units, primary windows. This is the only direction we have that we see out of. 545 is proposed to be 50 feet tall or 10 feet taller than our building, and so will block our sunlight and views of blue sky. Here's the sun study. Shows our pool in the rear. And June 21st is the best possible situation, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Existing conditions, we have good sunlight at our pool. And after the existing project is built, obviously our pool is in shade. And then December 21st, obviously worst case, but I thought it was a good representation of the slot that the light will be allowed into our building. So this is a plan view. It's a plan view of the fourth floor. And I would like to correct my black outline of their building because, as Toby pointed out, there is that public deck in the lower left corner of the plan. And I should have notched that out a little bit. But if you noticed, the deck ends before clearing our front wing. So the building, their building still attains full height and full width before our front wing returns or notches back. So the slot through which sun can reach our rear units remains narrow. Note the 2 triangles, number 1 and 2, they're important for the next 2 images. So triangle number 1 is from the pool looking forward to the street, and then 2 looking in the opposite direction. So here we go. This is from the pool looking towards the street. It's a picture of before and after, my approximation. Obviously, their elevation has grooves with recessed windows and so forth, but this view is just intended to show the size and the blockage. And the picture, the lower picture and before was taken on January 17th, so still pretty good light. And this is looking in the other direction. Same thing, January 17th, before conditions, pretty good light, and after, not getting much light. So 551 is shown in transparent section with 545 beyond. The 545 elevation shown is an older elevation where the details now differ, but the scale and shape of the current design is the same. Everything's to scale. These are the units in 551 that will lose blue sky visibility and sunlight.
So Vanessa, how much, I don't want to not allow you to speak, but I want to know how much extra time do you think you need?
Well, I'm kind of organized, so I've got, I guess, a few more minutes, right?
Okay, 2 or 3 more minutes. Okay.
Okay. So 32 and 16 are in the images that follow. That's why they're in orange. So briefly, just remember the T shape of our building. The next image will show the plane of those rear windows beyond the front wing. So this is for a condition of the impact on the third floor tenant. The purple is our building. The little people are standing at their floor levels. Everything's to scale. And the vertical dashed line in front of their bodies is the plane of the windows behind the front wing. The green outline is the existing building, which will be demolished. The yellow arc represents the visibility through these windows now, and the orange wedge represents what will remain after the 545 is built. So this is the third floor condition. And this is a picture image similar of the third floor, which is the best possible condition that they will experience. And if you notice on the left, that's right up next to the glass. They will still have a view of blue sky. But in the lower right, that's standing back about 2 feet. And they will lose quite a lot of view of sky. Similar second floor tenant. This is my situation. And then my situation here. So before and after. And I will have only a slight strip of blue sky remaining. And the first floor tenants, there's no photographs for that because they won't have any more blue sky visible from their windows. So recap, 12 units, 24 residents will be directly negatively impacted. The only windows of 9 residences will have no alternate windows facing any other direction. 3 other residences are also impacted. It's because we face northwest. We will lose afternoon sun and view of blue sky, and we're also going to lose summer sunshine at our pool by approximately 50%. So, Planning Commission, the wonderful thing about you guys is that even if the letter of the code is followed, the spirit of it may not be, and you guys ensure the spirit. So the question is, do we matter? And did the 24 residents of 12 units who will have sunlight and blue sky drastically reduced, in some cases blocked, matter? Do humans need sunlight and blue sky for health, wellness, and quality of life? Do the 60 residents in all 30 units who have enjoyment of the pool amenity reduced by 50% matter?
Okay, can you wrap it up, Vanessa?
Yeah, this is your prologue. Obviously, you have elements in here to your multi-use district. You have items in here about air quality of life and transition standards and appropriate buffers. And possible solutions to the situations. They could step back the upper stories more to create more notching through which sunlight could flow. They could reduce the building width and create setback from property lines to improve the quality of life for both 545 and 551. 545, if they did that, 545 could have more windows, maybe balconies, and screen plantings between the buildings would have more of a chance to be healthy. Or they could remove the upper story. And just one last statement about the trees. They don't really necessarily relate to me, and obviously I guess it's a tupelo tree, not a silk tree, but it's beautiful in the front, so I hope it finds a way to remain. And there's also a jacaranda tree on the opposite property that's about 40 feet high, very, very healthy, and it's about 3 feet from the property line, and I hope it also remains. So conclusion, please say we matter, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. All right, the next person is Michael Farson.
Thank you. Do we need to push a button on this thing? Oh, there it goes. Hi, my name's Mike Farson, and I live at 551 Walnut. And I just wanted to, I took these photos from my living room window, standing right up against the glass. So at my eye level, which is where I held the camera, I'm at 35 feet. The proposed structure next door will be at 50 feet, 15 feet higher than eye level, and the rear section of the building, this part here, will move closer to our building by 19 feet. So I will lose all of this view and wind up with something approximately like that. And I just took, I can be real brief up here, some other photos of what I think are pretty cool sunsets. This one here, I'll see that. And then I'll just run through these. You know, the different colors are, I just think, pretty spectacular. And I think it's very unfortunate that the code or codes can allow a superstructure to be built, what I'll call superstructure, a larger structure that can be built as close to this property and, you know, pretty much, or not pretty much, but absolutely eliminate all of these kind of views. So that's the last one there. I just thought, you know, sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words, and Vanessa did an incredible job with all of those, with her presentation and those designs. But when you get to see a real live photo of how it's affecting us, I think that makes it a little bit easier to understand the total impact. So,
Thank you, Michael.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Paul Siegel?
Thank you. My wife and I live at 512 Walnut, across the street, more or less, from the 545. We were here a month or so ago when we had the hearing about the 530 Walnut Street, which is right next to us. And we have some of the same concerns about this proposal, particularly since there's going to be all this excavation and moving of soil. And when we asked that there be as much mitigation as possible of the noise and dirt, my wife has a respiratory condition that makes her susceptible to, especially to dust in the air. So if there's anything you can add in that respect, we'd be very appreciative. Also, I apologize, we got here a little bit late, so I didn't hear if it was if there's any, what the days and hours are going to be of when construction will be allowed, if that's going to be weekdays 8 to 5, which would, or something like that, which would be our preference. And also curious if there's any projected start date and completion date on this. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. And J.D. Anagnostou? Pretty close. Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is J.D. Anagnostou. I am part owner of the property at 545 Walnut and a real estate agent for 30 years. So been around for a while. Thank you for allowing me to be here to speak on behalf of the project. I just wanted to mention a couple things in terms of the mass and scaling. We went through an arduous process of implementing the MUD design in terms of trying to make it fit. It is a 50-foot wide lot, and there's only a certain amount of lots that are within the MUD district to be able to do something. Obviously, the property currently is certainly underutilized, and things like that just simply don't last forever, unfortunately, but they do. Things change, just like the Lemoore situation too. But I wanted to also talk about the amount of supply that we have in terms of real estate, both in terms of owner-occupied and tenant-occupied in the city. Currently, as we stand, there's only 20 single-family homes for sale in all of San Carlos. There are 8 condominiums or townhouses in all of San Carlos. And there's one multifamily unit, as per the MLS. I don't have the commercial aspect, but typically 1 to 4 units is MLS available. For rent, through Craigslist, I saw and counted 40 rentals in all of San Carlos. So in terms of that, as well as the pricing of, not everybody can buy a home in San Carlos. The average price is $1,650,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. So I wanted to make it clear that with the 13 projects you currently have on the books for either approved or pending in the infill area of your city, there are 131 units, of which 81 units are for sale units. That leaves 50 units, including our units, the 9 units, to be for rent. The city needs supply for housing, and in a desperate need as well, because the schools are very good. The downtown has gone through a renaissance, as well as the single-family neighborhood has gone through a renaissance. And you've guys done a Herculean job to go through a process of redoing your 2030 plan to envision some of the growth in the downtown area, which is desperately needed. And we're trying to satisfy that need with this project. Some of the pictures and photos that you see, unfortunately, I'd be kind of concerned if it was just a black wall, but the building is not a black wall. It is a very beautiful building. The end result will be something that'll be very proud that you'd want to have in your town. It is a high-quality building. It meets the standards of both structural, civil, architectural, something that will withstand an earthquake of significant size that we know is forthcoming, and want to be prepared for that. This is a building that should be able to stand other buildings in the city you might want to be concerned about in terms of their integrity of structural going forward through an earthquake in terms of safety. We have implemented plans to increase the fire protection for the property, gone over and above in terms of making it safe. We want to make a safe building. We want a building that has been compatible or gone through a process of mitigation issues with the tenants of 551. I understand their concern. We had an on-site meeting with staff and architects and with Vanessa and Mike, to show us what they're looking at. And we went through a process to change things. We've also met with the ownership and their representatives, and having meetings with them to discuss issues that we can do in terms of mass and mitigation. So the plan is solid. The process has been thorough. We've also gone into the building aspects more than just the planning aspects because of the limitation on a 50-foot wide lot. But nevertheless, this is something I think you would be able to be considered proud to have as a St. Carlos property.
Thank you, JD.
So is there any discussion with 535 Walnut at all about landscaping? Has there been any, I assume there's no one here from 535 Walnut? It's surprising to me that there's...
Well, their building is set back, I should say, enough where there is some, the planting of that tree is on their site. The big 40-foot tree. In terms of, we've never had any negative issues come from the 535 Walnut.
They've never expressed it. I mean, have you spoken to the owner of the property?
It's a May property. It's a fourplex. We spoke with them. They've sent a letter of recommendation for our project.
Okay, thank you. Eva Transheva? I probably butchered that. If so, I'm sorry.
I live at 551, yes, very good. I live at 551 Walnut Street on the second floor facing the proposed project. And I just wanted to say I've been living there for a couple of years. I've been living in St. Carlos for these 2 years, and I would like to be a long-term resident of the area. I like the community. I like the location, but I also need my home to be comfortable. My residence right now is one of the units that only faces exclusively in the direction of the proposed structure. And right now I do have beautiful views of the city and the sky. And if that is replaced by a wall, regardless of how pretty the wall is, I would have to look for something else where I can feel comfortable at home. And even if I do, whether I can afford to or not is a different question, but even if I do move, and if that's the situation with people who can move, that the bulk of them move out, I feel like the property situation is going to be sort of inherited, and the location is going to attract people who cannot afford anything else. So to the point of the owner that that this increases the number of residences, I don't know that is, like, to me it doesn't seem that it's justified when the quality of life is decreased significantly for the neighbors, which I assume is the general point of this committee. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Eva. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to speak at this time? Okay. Would the applicant or architect wish to respond to any of the public comments?
Commissioners, I'd like to say that we were the ones who did the shadow study, and there were many other days where I think Vanessa sort of showed you the worst extreme of the shadows, and that just the orientation of the building and the orientation of the street grid meant that she was right that they shadow a lot of their own pool and this actually yard between us two. I'd also like to say that their building is set back, I think, 21 feet from the property line. So given the new zoning of the MUD, their units actually would still qualify. And in fact, if you look at our central unit, we've actually embraced that whole idea of the 20, we're actually not even required to have the 20-foot between windows, and we've opted to do it. And I think that given the, we've worked a lot with the color, the reflectivity, so it would actually bounce that sunlight back into the units. And, if we were creating such a hard condition, I would wonder why we would create our own units that have that sort of 20-foot dimension. I believe that can work, and I believe, yes, it is different, and it's unfortunate that it's going to be viewed so negatively by them. But I do believe that the reflected light can create a nice situation. It's not like giving them a 5-foot light well. And like I said, that is very similar to the type type of units that actually the design guidelines. And one other things, we all, besides subject to peer review on our building envelope and plan check, we also went through a peer review by another architect and actually incorporated their comments into our design as well.
So you speak of reflective material. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
It's more about the colors.
Colors reflect-
Yeah,
okay,
so the
okay.
colors, they're light on the outside, and then we had the brown stripes, and we limited our metals to be lower down to create that type of visual interest, and not only put the expensive material on the front of our building, but actually to, give it to the benefit of our neighbors next door as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question before we close public comment. Is the owner of 551 the actual owner of the building here? Okay. I was just looking through, of course, I had read earlier about the agreement. I have just a couple quick questions on 551. If you can answer them, great. If not, maybe they're for me to look at another time. If you don't mind, please. Please. Right. Do you happen to know when 551 was built? How old the building is? Approximately is fine.
I believe it is late 50s or early 60s, but I'm not 100% sure.
And was the front part of the T an addition or an add-on? It doesn't seem to look like a part of the rest of the building.
I think it's original to the best of my knowledge, but
Okay.
they changed the front. So just the surface of the front of the building has been changed from the sides, which is why it looks different in design.
But the actual size of it has been basically...
I don't believe that's been changed.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my only questions on 551.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else from the public wish to speak that hasn't spoke already? Okay. All right, I'd entertain a motion to close public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes. Okay, we'll open it up to discussion.
Goodness. Well, I have to say, I think I was struck when reviewing the project originally at some of the building at 545 certainly is larger, but of course meets our code. But there are many pretty sizable buildings in that same block, and that was one of the things that struck me. Unlike many of the developments we've looked at, say south of Laurel, where there's a new first big building coming, this is one of about maybe 4 just in this direct area of Walnut. And one of the reasons I asked the question about when 551 was built was that it strikes me as almost shocking that the owners of 551 wouldn't anticipate the plot of 545 to be developed at some point, because it does seem that 545 is such an underutilized property now. Just the side-facing windows on 551 really strike me as surprising, but of course I guess since it was built in the 50s that makes some sense. However, I think it's pretty clear that putting a building there, no matter how nice, is absolutely going to take away from light and view. I mean, I don't think there's any questioning that. Now what we have to do as a commission is balance, the right of the property owner at 545 to clearly develop an underutilized parcel with the rights of the property owner and the tenant that live at 551. So those are just my initial thoughts.
And I believe I checked with STEM that we do not have a sunshine/shade ordinance, right? Our zoning does not currently provide for protecting someone's sunlight or not causing them shade. That's my understanding, correct?
That is correct.
But doesn't it require appropriate buffers and transitions between buildings?
That is stated, I believe, in the purpose of the of the particular zoning district, which is then interpreted to mean that's why we have the standards in place that we do for each of these zoning districts.
I would also say that we've certainly used shading studies and considered view options in almost every development situation that's come forward, whether it be a single-family home or a larger complex. So even if we don't have a specific shade or sunlight protection ordinance, I'd say that we always consider it, at least in our conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we always consider it, but do we mandate that the property owner not exercise their right to build to the level of the code? I don't know.
That's a fair point.
I got to be honest. This one tugs up. This one really bothers me because I recognize the right of the property owner, both property owners, property owner 551 and 545, but there's people living there, and it feels like the people that we're supposed to protect and serve, we're not protecting and serving by doing this. So this one bothers me.
I think what we've seen in the past, and
I'm not protect and serve. I'm not a police officer, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'll give you the example. We had the property on Laurel Street in the 500 block of Laurel. I think it was Bob Stafford's property. It was a 50 by 100 or 50 by whatever. And the way he did it is he stepped back every floor as it went up. So there was opening to the buildings that were taller around it, or the single-family home on one side. I really have a problem with going straight up here, but that's just one of the many problems I have with this. So I think... Can I get the, I don't know if you want me to go through all the different things that I have. Let's start with parking. So there's a commercial space here, okay, that's providing no parking. It is the statement in the report that we got is that it could be a law office and there could be 10 individuals who use there. It said, this is staff report, okay? So staff said potentially there could be 10 people there at 100 square foot per person, even if it's half that. Even if it's 5 individuals, you have to deal with parking. And I recognize that our parking requirements don't allow us to do anything there, but there are things that we can do to make it easier for the surrounding neighborhood to deal with the additional traffic. So I think that's one thing that we really need to talk about. And we've done it in the past where we required a TDM, and we required that the business provide Caltrain passes free of charge, or 50% for every single person. I think we may need to put a TDM in place that requires that 50% of the people use some alternate mode of transportation to get there. So those are a couple of ideas that I have to deal with that piece of parking. I have an issue with the construction parking. You're going to be digging down. Where are all the construction vehicles going to be parked?
That's a good point.
That's a question.
Well, there's a 4-story parking garage right behind that project. I mean, if you go up there, I see there's a lot of adequate parking and I go up there all the time.
Except that I believe the city is planning on using that for the Wheeler Plaza project. So I'm just, I wouldn't count on that parking there. So, you know. I will want to make sure that there's no impact to the residents that are around there by construction parking. I still have an issue with the landscaping. Can the developer show me the landscaping again? Because within the project, it said minimum amount of landscaping is 15%, but then the additional note is consideration of an alternate landscaping plan. So can you show me what that alternate landscaping plan is? Hi.
So I think what's referred to as the alternate landscaping plan is just that the landscaping for the majority of the project is above grade. It's above the parking garage in the back. In the central courtyard, some of the front area. The only planting that's actually on grade is in the very front of the building, between the sidewalk and the front of the building.
I assumed the alternate referred to the landscaping that was going on the neighboring property. No?
No. There's a requirement of 15% of the property being landscaped. And I'm kind of curious about how we define that 15%. Is it based on canopy? Is it based on the size of the pot that contains the plant? I look at this and I say, it doesn't look to me like there's 15% landscaping here.
Well, I guess the rear of the building provided the most opportunity for landscaping, and would lawn or the entire area being planted provide more of a beneficial space than having an area where the people from the building can enjoy outdoor activities such as dining, barbecuing. That was our intent.
I understand your intent, but the intent of 15% of landscaping, at least to me, doesn't mean that we put a lot of pavers down and have a few trees that kind of cover it. It's, to me, when I think of 15% landscaping, I think of 15% of the property being planted with something. So that's a question that we'll have to discuss. I do have a problem with the landscaping on both sides of the building. I had a problem with the last project with the amount of landscaping, and vertical landscaping I'm fine with, but I don't see really any landscaping on the north side. Okay? And that's bothersome to me because that's going to be a big giant wall, and I'd rather see a green wall than the side of a building. Architecturally done very nice, but it could be even better with some planting kind of intermixed with it. Let's see. Can anyone tell me the height of this wall in the courtyard on the first floor?
Those the only questions for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you talking about, which wall are you talking about? In the courtyard?
Yes, obviously there's a wall on the courtyard between your building and the building next door.
Are you talking, okay, so
The building on the courtyard that faces the north side.
This is what you mean.
Yes.
Okay. That is 5 feet for part of the opening, and then I wish I could point it out. So it's 15 foot wide. It's 20 foot wide. It's 15 foot wide at the lowest level, and it becomes 2 feet wide as it steps up. So on the side elevation.
What I'm wondering about is the wall that is there. How tall is that wall in the courtyard?
The wall.
If you're standing in the courtyard and you're looking north, how tall is that wall?
42 inches.
So it's not 5 feet.
Oh, it's 5 feet above. I thought you were asking above grade. So if you have the parking is sunk 4 feet and it has a 1 foot structure, and then there's the 42-inch high parapet.
So it's 42 inches, which is 3.5 feet.
Yeah.
Which means that those people will be able to look over into the neighbor yard.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe there are no sort of windows into sort of living-like spaces in there.
And is there any landscaping along there?
I believe there is currently some landscaping along there.
As part of the
No,
patio?
as part of the existing.
Or as part of the...
They have a walkway that goes to the rear unit, and I think there's there's a walkway and there's some landscaping that abuts our property.
And is it tall enough to block the view from there, or is it...
To be quite honest, I don't really remember.
Okay.
Do you know?
The landscaping there is pretty heavily grown.
So it's trees?
Yes.
Okay, that's...
Steve Zamay, the owner of the property, would welcome us to do anything that was requested over there.
Okay.
They're all, we're in the same, we want as much privacy as possible.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get at. On the north side, I think it's lacking in landscaping. I think...
He's full of growth on that side, and he's very open to whatever.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that we can plant something that would survive, because of the envelope of the tree envelopes are quite large.
Right, and there's multiple ways of doing vertical landscaping and shrubs and yes, okay.
Same thing on the south side.
Yes, I was a little disappointed in the pictures of the south side because the landscaping doesn't look like it's more than 10 feet tall. And my personal feeling is I'd much rather look out at a green wall than at the side of a building. Let's see, what else? So the TDM, there was a comment about construction hours and the potential for doing those weekdays 8 to 5. Is there objection to that? Okay. That would mean no weekend construction.
What are we doing for dust mitigation?
Yeah, and I assume that the same dust mitigation that we've done across the street can be at 5:30. And then I still struggle with not setting at least the top floor back somehow.
I have to say, Scott, in my notes, the one thing I said is that I'd have a hard time approving this if the top story doesn't set back.
Yeah.
But so it makes the rest of the conversation
Easier.
correct.
Okay. I mean, that was really all I have. And, setting back that upper floor, it just seems to me that we've had a much, much easier time approving projects that were more like wedding cakes and stepped away from existing height than something that went straight up, especially either that or they've taken the top floor off.
Commissioner, we did, look at a variety of solutions, and I think the challenge is the 50-foot wide lot and our negotiations with the fire marshal. And I certainly understand your concerns, and I think we can cut back pieces of it. I think we've already moved our stairs and our elevators inbound, so any projection that might be related to going off the roof have already been moved inbound, I think 7 or 8 feet. And as I said, we've already chopped something off the 4th floor. So, I think our challenges are exiting, with that. So that's all.
I just wanted to ask, what kind of setback are you referring to? The sides, right? Because obviously it's the sides. So
the impact to the building and
what level of
particularly the building on 551. I can't remember, but I thought that we actually had some setbacks on some of these projects where the 3rd or 4th floor had to be set back.
Most of those setbacks were, I believe, I could be mistaken, but I think what you're talking about is when we've had primarily rear properties, and what we've done is we've had the top floor set back, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 feet, based on the idea that would provide more privacy to the rear properties. That's my recollection. I don't remember many properties where we required setbacks from the side.
Yeah. My feeling is that in past, people have come with setbacks in order to have some privacy, but
I just wanted to clarify that one of the projects that you might be thinking of is 436 Laurel, where that had the side yards step back,
Yes.
but that was under a different zoning district. And what is required for this project is that the upper story be set back, but that's from the street-facing facade, which is why you don't see it on the
not the
sides,
side,
but
but the street.
it is located on the front.
I'm sorry, Lisa, what was the address? 436 Laurel is what you're referring to?
That's right.
Okay, because I think that's what's in my mind. So part of me wants to look
that's
at that and see, even if
That's
it is a different district.
The one where we eliminated the tunnel?
no, actually, we had
don't
almost
think so.
no problem with 436 Laurel. Can we pull that up and take a look at it real quick? It's probably I know it's under construction now. You can
Yeah, I saw it
Google-
this weekend.
Show the Google view.
Yeah, I've been by that site. It's 45 by 155 with a RM59 district, right? Right?
Yeah.
And perpendicular parking, I believe, to it's 5 condominiums, is that correct?
Yes. In roughly the same amount of space. And I guess I guess, what?
A lot of variances on that job, right? On that project?
I don't remember.
We
any.
issued no variances.
No, I don't remember.
I don't believe they had any. To me, what this project feels like, honestly, is that you're trying to get and maximize absolutely everything you can for space in this 50 by whatever 100 lot. And I understand as a contractor, as a developer, as an owner, that's what you want to do. But it's our job to kind of go, does that really fit in that space there?
Well, we originally felt, since there is a 4-story project building next door, there's a 4+ story garage right behind us. It is mitigated with significant redwood trees behind us. We felt that this was the perfect spot to be able to do something like that. And the building next door is set back 22 feet from the property boundary. So I understand. I do understand.
Yeah.
But you've got a limited amount of lots to be able to do what you need to do in these MUD's districts. And over a lifetime, I don't know how many projects you're going to be able to see. Now, right now, we're certainly in an economic boom where you're seeing more of this throughout, not just St. Carlos on a smaller scale, but in larger scales in other areas. But, in going forward with something like this, increasing rental capacity, because this is for rent. This is not condominium. This is not for sale. This won't come off the market. These are permanent residential, rental residential properties that are desperately needed by the city. You have people that, that want to actually get out of their home, that have been in it for 50 years. They'll be single level living. They have an elevator that will, just like next door, will take them to that floor, to their building. I understand.
And I think your numbers are a little bit off because there's 200 along El Camino with the transit village as well as.
But yes, 200 will certainly help. But just to give you an idea, I put for rent a couple of properties in St. Carlos, and I've had over 100 inquiries into that. So you can see that.
I agree with the need for rental properties, and for that, that's one of the things that I must say that I do like about what you're trying to do, because the need for housing is desperate. Right, I understand that, but I'm really struggling with the impact that it is to the neighbors. I really am, because I feel like it's someone's basically someone's losing something and someone's gaining something, and I really don't like that. It seems to me there needs to be a better solution that we can work with to come up with this, so we have just a little bit of give on that, because it's a big impact, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'm really struggling with. I know we don't have a sun ordinance, shade ordinance, but there's certain civility and humanity that supersedes all that, and that's what I'm struggling with.
Commissioners, in looking at the plan standing here, you see where the light wells are. I think in negotiating with the building department, we got into a whole thing about distances, and so now I believe that if you drew a line from all of our light wells, it's like 3 feet back from the property line, except in front of the elevator where we can't move it because of the parking. I feel like from those light wells, we could, set back the upper story. If not most of the stories, we could set back that area 3 feet from the property line. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Oh, could you show me again?
But can
So
you show us
basically, if you look
on?
at the screen right now, there's those 3 little cutouts. She's basically saying that she could cut out all the way across there. Yeah.
Are those 3 feet deep?
Yes, they're 3 feet from the property line.
And so what is that space in there used for?
It was just going to be a generous hallway, and we could do it for, I think for almost all of our.
Let me check the other floor plans, because I think, like I said, except for the elevator and the first floor, but once the light wells appear, and you can see we've already set back our building like I think 9 inches from the property line. So from the property line, we could connect all those dots and set the building back 3 feet, starting right above the first floor. And I know it's not perfect, but I think I can look at it, and I realize the generosity we have, we should extend some, it's wrong not to give it back to the neighbors, so. And you can see in relationship,
That would make me feel better. I think that's a step in the right direction. I realize that probably this is not going to be a perfect solution for anyone, but my only concern there is that we have more of since those are not setback, that's going to make it more of a monolithic wall, but that's something that that I think that people could consider. I don't know, what do you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly pushing it, making it, pushing it all back, even if that does make it look more more static, you can use other things to vary it. Exactly.
To break that up.
I guess I'm struggling with whether that's, I'm just trying to envision the light, right?
Anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is challenging. David, I'm sorry, we kind of stopped at Scott with some of Scott's concerns. Did you have additional ones that we haven't thought of yet?
Let me see if there was anything else.
Or David?
TDM,
I mean, I'm going to support whatever you folks are going to do, and I imagine that this is probably going to seem pretty insensitive. I mean, the comments of the neighbors really resonate with me. I'm not going to suggest for a moment that they're not insignificant. I mean, they are. I mean, it significantly affects their quality of life for sure. I certainly wouldn't want to live next to this monolithic building. I mean, I'll give you that, but they're apartments. I mean, the owner of the building the owner of 551 is okay with this development. Presumably, this is going to reduce the value and the rents in 551, and if folks don't like their view anymore, and they don't believe that the rents are reduced enough. I agree. I mean, I'm happy to support. I'm not going to argue against setting it back. I mean, I think setting it back is a good idea, but I don't think, although I'm very sympathetic and I'm totally hearing what the people have to say, and they do matter, I just think I'm not struggling with it as much as perhaps you are.
I think, funny enough, I'd be less sympathetic for the owner, particularly if he bought the building recently, because it seems so obvious to me that this plot needs to be redeveloped that it would surprise me that he didn't take that into consideration.
The owner's not opposing it.
Right, and the owner's not opposing it. So it's, I think my challenge, of course, is that we are therefore looking at a building to house renters, and we also have renters next door.
Mm-hmm.
If we value our renters, I think we have to take both into consideration.
I value them. I totally value our renters 100%. No, and I know you didn't. It's just, it's an economic choice, right? I mean, we don't, for good or for worse, we don't have rent control.
How many people rent when they can own? I mean, when you're saying it's an economic choice, we want to get into a philosophical discussion about that. I would sort of go toe-to-toe with you on that one.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting it's an economic choice to rent. I'm saying it's an economic choice to rent where you rent.
Okay.
So then, I guess where are we now then? Would be my question.
If the three of you would like this set back, I think that where we are is we're at the point of continuing this to another date to give the developer an opportunity to redesign the plan with a setback. I mean, I think that's where we are right now. And if there's other things that you folks want them to do, I mean, I think that we should give them guidance at this point about the other things we want them to do when they bring the plans back.
Okay. I would feel comfortable with that. Do you want to talk about the other things you want to?
And I would like to get sort of some consensus from the commission, the other commissioners. Parking? Does anybody other than me have a problem with
our usual challenge with parking? I mean, I almost feel redundant saying it about
of course I do.
Space.
To be honest with you, I mean, it's going to be an issue for everything that comes up with this. And over the next 15 years, the landscape of who drives and who takes public transit is probably going to drastically change. And the cities are basically forcing, whether they like it or not, the cities and the state are forcing the hands of whether you drive or ride, right? Yeah. So I think that I would support TDM and to make it more attractive for people to actually use public transit than to use the parking.
So can staff come back with a proposal for a TDM?
And I'm actually looking at notes from 530 Walnut, and that we added a condition, I believe, that says TDM includes subsidized transit passes specifically for 530 Walnut.
Yes. And a certain percentage of people, there's an expectation that, I think it was either 25 or 50% expectation in lowering of the number of trips.
So I think that particular percentage might have been for Arroyo.
Oh,
but I know how we get when we're thinking previous projects.
Let's
so.
let staff look at a
Right,
TDM
fair
plan
enough.
and maybe come back with a plan.
Fair enough.
And through the chair and to all of the commission, just to clarify, this project here is not subject to the TDM ordinance. That doesn't mean that the commission can't require something. However, what staff would like to hear is what types of, we would like to get some direction from the commission as far as what you would like to see in the TDM plan, or if there's some sort of benchmark that you're trying to achieve through TDM. I do believe the project is already proposing short-term and long-term bicycle parking. So if there's anything else that you can, if it's...
I would begin with transit passes.
Yeah,
Subsidized transit
I have a
passes.
solid note that we did it for 530 Walnut. That's why I'm so married to it, because it's Walnut, I guess.
So I'm absolutely 100% supportive of transit passes at all times, always. I don't really see the point in it. They're just going to increase the amount of rent based on the value of the transit passes. But that's fine.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, and I think maybe the parking concern to me seems more about the commercial space anyway.
Yes. But
So
maybe there could be a sharing of the parking spaces between the commercial and the residential if individuals who live there are potentially offered transit passes at a reduced cost in return for giving up one of the parking spaces or something like that. There are ways that you can work on that, and that's why I said send it back to staff, work with the owners and the developer, and see if you can come back with a plan that is something that we can get behind. I'd like to see us include the construction hours of weekdays 8 to 5.
and the same dust mitigation measures that we had at 530.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I would like to see a plan for landscaping on the north and the south side of the building. And then a plan for where the construction vehicles are going to park, whether it's negotiated with the Samtrans parking lot or whether there's an off-site
So construction
location.
staging plan? Or
Yes.
construction parking staging plan?
Yes. And I think that was it for the big things. And then, of course, we would like them to work with staff on dealing with the setback, whether it be on the side, whether it be on the top floor. I think we're all kind of uncomfortable, or some of us are uncomfortable with the.
I mean, I get. I mean,
I'm not talking about you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And through the chair, before we move on, with respect to those setbacks, is the commission's preference for staff to work with the applicant on the fourth story setback or additional stories?
I mean, if it's feasible to do it on the fourth and third, I would think both. But if we're just talking about that 3-foot indentation, that would be kind of where I'm settling.
My personal feeling would be that we could look at that 3-foot indentation as well as possible additional setbacks on the fourth floor.
Yeah.
If we can, if there's a way to find those.
So the 3-foot indentation and additional setbacks on the fourth floor in lieu of the fourth and third floor?
Or maybe...
Or either or?
I think that what they're proposing is so that 3 feet comes off the building all the way from the top to the bottom with an additional setback for the fourth floor.
That's
think
kind of what I
folks are
think
talking
Scott
about.
and I were.
Just a thought on that. You may want to break that up where you maybe don't have it on the first and second floor and then you have it on the third and fourth, because even if you did cut off 3 feet continuously,
Yeah, I
you
don't
still
wanna-
have that appearance,
yeah.
right?
I really don't want a monolithic wall.
That's why I said these are just ideas we're throwing out. Work with staff and come back to us. We're not so hard set on everything. The idea is to try and give the residents next door some break in their views and sunlight.
So you guys work together, and third and fourth floor push back 3 feet with hopefully, Scott, maybe some additional setback on the fourth floor? Is that kind of what you're hoping?
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay.
So it sounds like, again, so now it's 3 feet, 3 feet on the third floor, and then presumably more than 3 feet on the fourth floor is what I think, what we're talking about.
I don't want to constrain them to say absolutely this is the way it needs to be done. I want them to go and come back with a plan that is in the spirit of trying to set back to give the
Sure, I just want to make sure that if they come back, they don't have to
In the
come back
guidance,
again.
right.
So like if they come back with 3 feet on the third and fourth floor and that's it,
then
are you going to be satisfied by that?
I'm probably not going to be happy with that.
Yeah, okay, that's what I figured.
All right. So is that enough guidance for staff at this point?
How much time does the applicant need to redesign their third and fourth floor and come back?
2 weeks, 4 weeks.
I don't know, do we want to do a date certain so we don't have to renotice?
That's up to you guys.
It's up to you. You can have as much time as you want. If you don't want us to, if you're willing to renotice, you can come back whenever you want. If we continue it to a date certain, we don't have to renotice. If we don't continue it to a date certain, you have to renotice.
That would be the 19th.
19th?
Yeah.
Is that available? What's the pleasure of staff?
I'm
mean,
sorry, we're
what-
talking
what,
October 12th?
19th.
19th, I
What projects
apologize.
do you have slated for that
We
day?
have a fair number of projects coming forward, but how we would prioritize is if this project was continued and it was continued to a date certain, we'll get it on the agenda. Okay.
So
Okay, so-
I move to continue the matter to October 19th.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. All right, where'd my sheet go? Reports, correspondence, and general information. Any report on city council actions?
Nothing for this evening.
Okay, planning commission comments or reports?
I have one. And is there any way that we can sort of have an update to the zoning ordinance that solves the issue of commercial less than, I think it's 1,000 feet, or less than 500 feet, or how they go about breaking that up? Is that something we can move forward and deal with that on, because we keep having this issue all through the downtown area, and it all revolves around parking. And if we could, you know, have a solution to some of this, like, you know, if it's a certain size, irrespective of whether they're going to break it up, they still need to have parking versus, you know, they have one that's 300 square feet is different than having, you know, 3 different 450 square foot pieces that, you know, don't require any parking at all. So I'm just wondering if there's any way to take, because that I have an issue with that with this project. I had an issue with that with the last project and probably a couple of projects before that. So I'm just wondering if there's any way we could kind of move that to the forefront and bring that back to us as a way to solve that so it's not an issue for us in future projects.
I know that in our last discussion at our last meeting, we were talking about alternatives, and one of the things I had said about what had challenged me about the project that was so far south was that there wasn't an obvious public place to park. So I guess my point is that for commercial spaces, having no parking, I'd actually be okay if there's a public lot right by it or an obvious place to park right by it. But when there's not an obvious place to park, that becomes more of a concern for me. And I know, Al, you had mentioned, because of my concern at the last meeting, you'd mentioned talking more about where the city was with parking sharing and the next step of the downtown parking study. And I don't know if that ties into what Scott's suggesting or not, but I just thought I'd reiterate that.
Well, it's a policy issue, and I think that the policy's been set in the zoning code. It's challenging, but I think the commission has done a good job on a case-by-case basis. So I think that each case is different because of where it is. So it could be that one particular location would have more parking availability on the street. So, I think that dealing with it on a case-by-case basis is you're able to do the right thing in that way. And so that's the way I would recommend moving forward with this, on a case-by-case basis. And we can do analysis on, how many parking spaces are in the vicinity. And as noted, we're going to be embarking on the phase 2 of the downtown parking study, which would include, looking at shared parking and other things. In addition, we have been directed by the City Council to study and most likely implement a parking permit program for Walnut Street. So that would kind of solve the problem for the residential neighborhood, just like it did in the greater East San Carlos neighborhood. So I think that's the way that the council has sort of made that determination in terms of the challenges that we're having with some of the businesses along that Laurel Street corridor.
I just feel like they're taking advantage of the fact that it's under 500 feet, and so they do a 490 square foot and then another 490 square foot. And I think, I don't have a problem if it's one, but it's the fact that they aggregate them in such a way as to have multiple businesses and no parking provided whatsoever. And all that capacity is going to be used up very quickly if we continue down the road that we are, and we'll have exactly the same problem that we have right now, even after the expansion of the parking at Wheeler Plaza. And so I'm looking to avoid that, and it may be something simple as saying, up to 500 feet, you don't have to have, but beyond that, each additional 500 feet you need to provide, I'm looking for a middle ground here.
Well, it could be that the code, I think your case-by-case analysis gives you some discretion to do that.
I struggle a little bit with this as well because, I feel, and based on my comments in general, I feel like when something is in compliance with the zoning ordinance, we're supposed to approve it. And so we do kind of get into a negotiation in these discussions.
Right.
But I would feel much more comfortable if we just had something that said that with respect to these small commercial uses, that we're supposed to make a finding that on-street parking is adequate, or alternatively that we can make a finding when on-street parking is not adequate, that some amount of parking is required, because I think that would actually codify our discretion to do it on a case-by-case basis while still having sort of the starting point being that it's not necessary. That's kind of what I would propose, just because I know that we treat it like we have discretion. But frankly, I think it becomes more of a negotiation with the property owners, and if they ever really did stick to their guns, I'm not sure that we could force them to do what we're asking them to do voluntarily. So that's something to think about, if you would.
Think about it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to mention is I think at one point we discussed at some point taking a tour, noticing and everything of completed projects. I don't know if we have any completed projects to go to, but maybe toward the end of the year, if things are finishing up, I think I'd like to see the what's going on, what actually things look like when they're done and the impact of this to the neighborhood. So is that possible?
I think that's a great idea, and that goes to the question about shared parking. And, from a staff perspective, and I know a lot of the development community understands that during the day, those residential parking garages are empty. And one of the ways that we did it with Wheeler Plaza, for instance, is we said, okay, as part of that deal, we will have retail parking spaces in the residential area during the day so that those retail workers can park underground away from the public parking. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to help our parking situation utilizing those spaces, but we'd love to put together some kind of a tour for the commission. So why don't we start working on that and give us a little time to put our heads together, and we'll come back with something for you and let you know how it's going. But we will prepare some kind of a tour to where it kind of goes to parking and perhaps other issues that you're struggling with as well.
Yeah, because we keep hitting the same issues, and I think it'd be helpful if we could, thank you. I appreciate that.
And that was why I was kind of suggesting, is there some way to have shared parking within this individual project? So, if you've got a business there that's, an office from, 8:30 to 4:30 or 8:30 to 5:30, then they could use a couple of spaces until people got, there are opportunities even within individual projects for that to happen.
And I think that's something that you could definitely consider. Also, I think it would be interesting to do a trip, or even if you in your travels around town when you're picking up your dry cleaning or whatever you're doing, is look at parts of Laurel Street during the business hours, because there's large swaths of Laurel Street where you do have small business right across from apartment buildings. And what you'll see is, there are certain times of the day at lunch, perhaps, that get more busy. But for the most part, you're able to find a parking space within a block of where you need to go for whatever service or retail that you're trying to do in the downtown. So it's sort of an example of perhaps a continuation of that idea down Laurel. And most of them don't have parking, but utilize the street parking. So that maybe is something that we can look at in our community and take some examples out there.
Great, thank you. Correspondence?
None this evening.
Planning staff comments, reports, and updates of current projects.
Our next meeting will occur on Monday, October the 5th, and we have a project that'll come before you. It's another mixed-use project on San Carlos Avenue. I believe we're going to be scheduling 1525 San Carlos Avenue. It looks like we may have a couple of other smaller projects, but another mixed-use project to present before the commission.
And when are they breaking ground on Wheeler and on Transit? I would have thought they would have already done that. They have their permits, right?
Well, it takes a long time to go through sort of the iterative permit process for a big project like the Transit Village, so that one's they're actually still both in plan check. Okay. And, when you get approval, then there's a mad rush to kind of do the construction part, and you get teams of different people, engineers and the building folks, so it takes a while. There's a 6-month maybe period where you're trying to wrap things up. So that's why it seems like it's taken a long time, but people are working furiously to get those plans done and reviewed. So Wheeler is 2016, April of 2016.
Okay.
That will break ground. And I would assume that the Transit Village would be a very similar time frame.
Okay. Thank you.
The work on El Camino right now is not in any way related to the Transit Village?
No, it's not. Actually, the work on El Camino that you're seeing near Arroyo Street is an Arroyo Street improvement project, and it's tied to a grant that the city got to improve the underpass area. You know, where you come through at Arroyo, there's an underpass underneath the railroad tracks that connects the east and west sides. We got a grant to improve that area in front of Arroyo, so to make it more pedestrian and bike friendly. There's going to be a little area, like a plaza-like area there, and also improve the crosswalk across El Camino Real and do some other improvements there. So it's sort of part of the Grand Boulevard improvements that we're doing incrementally as we go down. So that's what you're seeing there.
One last question. The hotel, is that also spring of 2016?
That may actually be earlier. And what they would like to do, working with the city engineer, and it all depends on the weather, but to start demolition maybe before December. So it just depends on, again, the reading the plans, going through the plan process and that kind of thing. So I think you may see some demolition starting before Christmas, theoretically. But in grading, they'd like to grade, but again, it depends on the weather. So maybe after the winter that we start to see a lot of stuff happening in the spring, yes.
And is there any plan to deal with all the projects going on at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
There are. And, people ask, well, isn't this going to affect downtown? I mean, essentially they're going to affect different parts of the community at different times and in different ways. But I guess the other thing that we're real cognizant about is, answering questions and doing public relations during this period of change. And so we're looking at ways to communicate with the public in every way possible and doing a good job and answering questions and trying to make it as easy for the community as we possibly can. So yes, we're working on some kind of a public information plan during this big construction upswing.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nothing for me.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Here.
Yeah.
You could say you chaired your first meeting.
Oh, no, she chaired her second or third by now.
That's when you said you mean over your dead body.
Before.
Old hat at this now.
Sure.
I said you're old hat at this now.
Actually, doing an RDRC is actually
Big
makes it that's